Hey, welcome to Built in Silence. Today we're going to be doing the first installment of His Story, where I'm going to be going all the way back to ancient Egypt to the modern day. And there's a lot of internet talk going around that really inspired me to create this, such as terms like black fatigue or when I looked up black Egyptians. Wait, you haven't seen the videos I'm talking about? Like this?
There's not one monument in Africa, in all of Africa. I know you're talking about Egypt. Egypt is not Africa. There are no great cities that were built. Even before the first colonization of white people coming to the shores of Africa or the slave ships, black men built nothing. There's something wrong with the black man's mind. There's something wrong with his mind. He does not understand the world.
It's even more shocking and ironic how they found that the mummies had 0 sub-Saharan African genes. Modern Egyptians had 15 to 20% African genes. That means that modern Egyptians are actually more black than their ancestors ever were. How ironic is that?
Because black fatigue is real. I think society as a whole is there. We are just so unbelievably fed up with the ghetto ratchet behavior, entitlement, the victimhood.
Yeah. Someone needs to address this. And everything that I'm talking to you today is straight facts, science, and DNA.
Let me first honor my direct ancestors, all confirmed through DNA, my Grandma Helen and Grandma Sarah. I miss you too, so much. Now I trace a lineage that connects both heart and history. On my paternal side, I share a direct ancient paternal lineage with Pharaoh Ramses III. His son, Prince Pentaweret, though caught in the tragic harem conspiracy, is also part of my ancestral line. I also honor the unnamed 17th century West African man buried in Avery's Rest, Delaware, one of the earliest documented Africans in colonial America who shares my paternal lineage. This journey has been over 15 years of research, practice, and study. I welcome everyone to the conversation, and I encourage you to fact-check every word I say. Before we talk about anything, we need to go back because the truth about Egypt has been buried under layers of conquest, confusion, and colonization. Let's break this down. Egypt, originally called Kemet, meaning the Black Land, a flourishing place with rich dark soil, and was a spiritual and scientific powerhouse built by Black African hands. From Nubian bloodlines came pharaohs, pyramid builders, and astronomers. For over 2,000 years, Egypt was ruled by indigenous Africans. But then came the invasions. 525 BCE, the Persians invaded. 332 BCE, the Greeks arrived with Alexander the Great, renaming cities and rewriting history. 30 BCE, the Romans took over, followed by centuries of whitewashing and erasure. Then in 641 CE, the Arab conquest brought Islam, Arabic language, and a whole new population. Over time, these foreign groups settled, mixed, and dominated the region, politically, culturally, and genetically. So why do many modern Egyptians today believe they are the original ancient Egyptians? Here's the proof, grounded in DNA, historical timelines, and cultural reality. So, respectfully, modern Egyptians are living in Egypt, but they are not the ancient Egyptians. Just like modern Mexicans aren't direct descendants of the Olmecs, and modern Italians don't come from Roman gladiators, people today aren't exact reflections of the civilizations that came before them. Over time, history mixes, dilutes, and reshapes the people tied to it. Time moves, populations shift, but history leaves clues, and one of the deepest clues is in our biology. Arab settlers became the face of Egyptian identity, while Black Africans, the builders, the priests, the originators, were erased from the image of their own creation. Hollywood made movies with white pharaohs, textbooks skipped Nubia, statues had their noses broken to hide broad African features. But here's the proof. Ancient DNA studies show that Egypt's original population was genetically closest to sub-Saharan and East and West Africans, not modern Arabs. The paternal DNA haplogroup of Pharaoh Ramses III, one of Egypt's last great kings, is E1b1a, the exact same haplogroup found in West and Central Africans today, including me. That includes African Americans, Jamaicans, and many others in the diaspora. Statues, wall paintings, and inscriptions clearly show dark skin and African facial features. My direct paternal ancestor, Pharaoh Ramses III, ruled Egypt from 1186 to 1155 BCE. Egyptologists and historians widely regard him as the last truly great pharaoh of native African descent, before Egypt fell into centuries of foreign rule and cultural distortion. Modern DNA testing of Ramses III's remains, conducted by the Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities and published in the British Medical Journal, BMJ 2012, confirmed he belonged to the Y chromosome haplogroup E1b1a, EV38. I carry that same exact haplogroup, E1b1a. Under Ramses III's reign, cultural achievements included the world's first labor strike, formal court systems, and grand constructions honoring Ma'at, Amun, and Osiris. This nation was ruled by law, balance, and African brilliance. Africa wasn't waiting to be civilized. It was the cradle of civilization. Let's get this clear. It was the mother of humanity, the first builder of cities, the first innovator of language, science, and spiritual law. Civilizations across Africa were flourishing while Europe was still grappling with tribal survival, ice, and isolation. Now let's go deeper. Africans were studying the cosmos, crafting complex medicine, and writing legal and moral codes rooted in balance and justice. Before Oxford, before Cambridge, Africans had Sankoré University in Timbuktu, built in the 10th century, expanded under Mansa Musa in the 1300s. At its peak, 25,000 students, 180 plus scholars, 700,000 handwritten manuscripts, and the subjects, not folklore, real science. They studied astronomy, planetary cycles, solar calendars, eclipses, and star charts, mathematics, geometry, algebra, inheritance law, building equations, medicine, surgeries, tumors, malaria, birth control with acacia, dental tools, engineering, irrigation, architecture, water systems, climate design law, justice rooted in Ma'at and Sharia, courts, ethical rulings, grammar, mastering Arabic, documenting African languages, philosophy and logic, debating fate, ethics, God and the soul, poetry and rhetoric, writing, performance, political speech, mysticism, dream science, soul purification, spiritual medicine, geography and history, trade routes, kings, maps, African world dynasties. This wasn't just education, it was civilization, built by black minds, protected by African hands. Foreign invasions didn't bring progress. They burned libraries, outlawed languages, called our healers witches, labeled African knowledge primitive. They didn't civilize us, they looted us and called it help. Now back to Egypt. Before we list the specific methods used to distort Egypt's African identity, we need to understand how deliberate and sustained this campaign was. This was not a series of innocent academic errors or natural erosion of artifacts. This was a well-coordinated and culturally sanctioned effort to sever Egypt from Africa, physically, spiritually, and intellectually. So colonial powers rewrote history with precision. They rewrote textbooks, they misattributed artwork, they physically damaged statues, and they told us, generation after generation, that Egypt was somehow other. Let's break down exactly how they did it. Scholars like Diop and Keita showed DNA, skulls, and limbs matched sub-Saharan Africans, but institutions suppressed their findings for decades. Restorers in the 1800s, 1900s painted over dark brown skin, making rulers look pale. Rebranded as Mediterranean, Egypt was called Near Eastern to avoid saying African. The rewriting of Egypt's identity was extremely intentional. This was not historical confusion, it was a calculated erasure of African brilliance, reinforced across education, media, and policy. And here's the proof anyone can understand. Just look at the statues. You've seen the broken noses on Egyptian statues. That wasn't time or erosion, it was targeted destruction. Scholars like Edward Bleiberg have publicly stated these features were destroyed specifically to remove African traits, confirming the noses weren't worn down. They were intentionally broken to erase African features. Egypt was whitewashed, and the museums? For decades, museum curators and Egyptologists denied researchers like Cheikh Anta Diop access to carbon date mummies because they feared the results would confirm African origins. They weren't protecting science, they were protecting a myth. Now how about Hollywood? From the 1956 film The Ten Commandments to 2014's Exodus, white actors were cast to play Egyptian rulers. These portrayals reshaped global perception and created an image of Egypt that matched European fantasies, not African reality. Elizabeth Taylor as Cleopatra, Christian Bale as Moses. Entire docuseries debates on race over truth. Let's pause for a moment on Cleopatra. Cleopatra VII, the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic dynasty, was not African in ancestry. She was Macedonian Greek. Her family came to power after Alexander the Great conquered Egypt, and for generations they ruled Egypt as foreigners. Cleopatra herself lived from 69 to 30 BCE, over 2,000 years after the Great Pyramid of Giza had already been built. She was closer in time to us than she was to the original builders of Egypt's temples, pyramids, and sacred traditions. And yet, she's one of the most remembered figures in Egyptian history. Why? Because history favored the conquerors, not the creators. Cleopatra's reign marked the final chapter of Egyptian sovereignty. Her political entanglements with Julius Caesar and later Mark Antony ultimately led to the fall. The rewriting of Egypt's identity was extremely intentional. She ruled a land she did not truly understand. The obsession with her is a distraction from the millennia of Black brilliance that came before her. We don't learn about Imhotep, the father of medicine. We don't learn about Ptahhotep, the philosopher of Ma'at. We don't learn about the African genius who aligned monuments to the stars. Instead, we're fed the love story of Cleopatra and Caesar, the very figures who helped bring Egypt to ruin. Even the Roman historian Cassius Dio recorded that Caesar looted Egyptian temples and paraded Cleopatra through Rome as a spectacle, not as a queen of wisdom, but as a trophy of conquest. This is what happens when history is told from the side of those who conquered, not those who created. Scholars like Dr. Vanessa Davies and Dr. Shomarka Keita have shown that speaking the truth about Egypt's African identity can lead to professional backlash, lost grants, and censorship. In other words, telling the truth about Black greatness is still risky. And the genetics? Multiple peer-reviewed studies, including one in Nature Communications 2020, show ancient North African DNA had strong sub-Saharan links before foreign invasions. This wasn't just about hiding history, it was about controlling identity. Because again, if the world ever saw Africa as the birthplace of genius, order, and empire, then white supremacy couldn't exist. Now, to the present. Today, America faces a profound crisis that disproportionately impacts Black communities, but affects the nation as a whole. Balance is crucial. Acknowledge our historical pains, but never let them define us. We are living in an era where being seen has become more valuable than being whole. Too many of our women, especially our sisters, have been caught in a digital trap disguised as freedom. Social media has turned pain into performance. They're not just showing skin, they're showing symptoms, calling it confidence. But the truth is, most of it's mimicry. They're copying what the machine promotes, not what the soul needs. And it's not empowerment, it's exploitation with a filter. They've been told to be loud, told to be hard, told to get the bag and not worry about the damage left behind. And slowly, America masculinized the Black woman, told her she didn't need a man. Now too many are emotionally unreachable, yet visibly exposed, measuring love by attention and value by clicks. But it's not just on them. Let me talk to the men, because we've been quiet, too quiet. Letting people disrespect us in the name of peace, letting the family fall apart while we chase validation outside the home. Fathers who walked away, brothers who lost direction, leaders who stayed silent while the system trained our women to survive without us. And too many of us masked our pain with pride. We glorified street life instead of healing from it. We mocked the ones who studied, the ones who prayed, the ones who dreamed. So now what do we have? A community where women are hardened and men are hiding. Where love feels like a weakness and clout feels like currency. We both need healing. We both need truth. And it starts with accountability from all of us. I've always was a bright kid. In middle school, I was already making music. Band, rock band, orchestra. I was into everything. Rap, yes, but I also had a new love for rock. At a time when being different was dangerous, I skated, I played football, I fought when I had to, but I never lost my balance. I led by example. I did my best in school. I stayed spiritually grounded. I honored Jesus Christ as my #1 role model, not just for religion, but because he was the kind of man I aspired to be. I needed that. I was a dreamer who wanted to live a noble life. I love my dad, but there were things I needed from him that never came. Conversations that could have spared me pain. But hey, with the help of my oldest sister, I grew through it. And my mom, God bless her, did everything she could. But the reality is, it was never supposed to be on her shoulders alone. I survived because I kept my spirit intact. I didn't run from it. Too many of us abandoned our posts. And when the smart ones, the ones inclined to build, to think, to rise, showed their gifts, they got mocked, called corny, called weird. So they left. And when they made it out, they never came back. I know this because I am that kid, but I lived the opposite. Black fatigue is the cost of survival in a system built against us. I didn't fold into bitterness. I became what I needed and what others needed to see. And while I was doing that, I was also studying code, learning how the internet moves people. In college, I took psychology classes, And I was exposed to the craziest tests and information to understand what makes us tick. I saw the dopamine patterns in public data. I saw how platforms manipulated validation. And I predicted through one of my early projects that a platform would come where people, especially women, would be rewarded not for wisdom, not for creativity, but for taking off one more article of clothing. And now, here we are. But I'm not here to shame anybody. I'm here to say it's time we reset. We can't keep letting an algorithm parent our daughters. We can't keep calling survival style. We can't keep ignoring the silence of our sons. We need examples again, not just followers, not just content, but men and women who live differently and lead openly. Because what we build next depends on what we choose to become right now. Letting culture use our face while muting our voices. Watching our sisters spiral while we nod and scroll. But I've learned, I've grown. So I'm not here to throw shame at anybody. I'm here to spark a conversation, something I needed, something we all need. Let me be clear, respecting others does not mean tolerating disrespect. Being calm is not the same as being passive, and being present is not the same as being silent. America, this is not merely a black issue. It is a national emergency. I believe prioritizing prison expansion over nurturing parenting invests in collective downfall. Real support for black men translates into education, mental health services, rehabilitation programs, and dignified employment. When black men rise, America rises. So listen when I say this. Black fatigue is not weakness. It's not laziness. It's not apathy. And it's certainly not a lack of willpower. Black fatigue is the cost of survival in a system built against us. While many immigrant groups chose to come to America, seeking opportunity, welcomed with pathways to land, education, and small business support, we were brought here in chains. And even after slavery, the very people who enslaved us were compensated for their loss of property. We got nothing but more struggle. Yet it was our marches, our blood, and our courage that made civil rights a legal reality for everyone. We fought battles that others benefited from. We cracked open the door and they walked through it. But let me back up real quick. You don't even know why my people were fighting so hard. Let's go back about 30 years earlier. Quick note, there have been dozens, if not hundreds, of recorded violent attacks, massacres, and state-supported destructions of prosperous black communities across the United States. Just when we began building again, when black professionals, educators, entrepreneurs, and leaders were rising in every field, we were struck again. The 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre wasn't just a night of violence, it was an intentional act of economic warfare, a premeditated erasure of black brilliance, an attack on black self-sufficiency, dignity, and upward mobility. Greenwood, Oklahoma, known across the nation as Black Wall Street, was home to over 10,000 African Americans living in peace, wealth, and innovation. It featured more than 600 black-owned businesses, including law firms, private planes, libraries, movie theaters, medical clinics, banks, and grocery stores. Families lived in two-story homes, sent their children to college, and practiced true cooperative economics before the term was even popularized. This was not a struggling community. This was a thriving black ecosystem, self-built in the face of segregation and systemic exclusion from white America. But in just 18 hours, all of it was destroyed. Between May 31st and June 1st, 1921, white mobs, many deputized and armed by local authorities, launched one of the worst acts of domestic terrorism in U.S. history. Over 200 black homes were burned to the ground. 35 city blocks were erased from the map. Hundreds of lives were lost, many buried in unmarked mass graves. Aircraft were used to drop incendiary bombs on the neighborhood. Insurance claims were denied across the board, so survivors received nothing. This wasn't a riot. It was a military-style assault backed by silence and impunity. The destruction of black-owned banks, homes, and businesses wiped out. They destroyed generational momentum. Economists estimate that if Black Wall Street had been allowed to grow uninterrupted, the community could have produced billions of dollars in generational wealth by today, enough to empower tens of thousands of families with home ownership, education, capital, and land. And over $200 million in today's value was wiped out overnight. Doctors, teachers, pilots, authors, inventors, black professionals who were serving and educating their communities were killed or displaced. We lost not just their lives, but their ideas. The schools they would have built, the books they would have written, the medicine they would have advanced, the cultural institutions they would have founded. After the massacre, no reparations were ever granted. Survivors were forced into internment camps and told to clean up their own destroyed neighborhoods. Families were scattered, many too traumatized to return. This rupture created a ripple effect. Generations born into economic instability Trauma passed through DNA and behavior, distrust of the American promise, education systems, and even one another. The massacre was erased from textbooks and official records for nearly a century. This intentional silence ensured that Black students grew up not knowing their own greatness. White students never faced the truth of systemic violence. America could pretend this never happened. The legacy Greenwood could have been the model for Black prosperity nationwide. Instead, it became a scar hidden beneath concrete and denial. The people of Black Wall Street weren't just victims, they were visionaries. They built something without help, and America burned it because it couldn't control it. To this day, the racial wealth gap, the underdevelopment of Black communities, and the limited access to generational equity can all be traced directly back to moments like Tulsa. We are not poor by accident. We were destabilized by design. Business equity and intergenerational transfer were lost permanently. And the impact? It wasn't just emotional or economic, it was biological. Studies in epigenetics now prove what our ancestors already knew. Trauma gets passed down. In one landmark experiment, researchers at Emory University, 2013, trained male mice to fear the smell of cherry blossoms by pairing it with electric shocks. And the result? The mice learned to fear the smell. But here's the twist. Their children and even grandchildren were also afraid of the smell, even though they had never encountered it or been shocked. So imagine what centuries of enslavement, lynchings, bombings, broken families, and buried potential have done to us, not just to our minds, but to our blood. We are the descendants of interrupted greatness, and yet we still rise. The fatigue we and our nation is feeling is not failure. It's the weight of carrying what was never ours to bear alone. But now we see it for what it is. Now we name it. Now we begin to release it. Not just for us, but for those unborn, so they inherit not just our wounds, but our wisdom. And with that, I'm going to end this by listing this list of occurrences not widely known that without acknowledgement would be irresponsible of me not to mention, but advisory. This is for knowledge purposes, as they all deserve to be remembered. 1866. Memphis, Tennessee, Memphis Massacre. White mobs and police killed 46 Black residents, destroyed 90+ homes, schools, and churches. 1866, New Orleans, Louisiana, New Orleans Massacre. White supremacists attacked a Black-led constitutional convention. Over 200 injured or killed. 1873, Colfax, Louisiana. Colfax Massacre. White militia killed an estimated 62 to 153 Black men defending a courthouse during Reconstruction. 1898, Wilmington. A Wilmington coup. Armed white supremacists overthrew a biracial local government, killed dozens, and destroyed Black press. 1917, East St. Louis, Illinois. East St. Louis Massacre. Estimated 39 to 150 Black people killed, hundreds of homes torched. 1919, nationwide Red Summer, over 25 race massacres across U.S. cities, including Chicago, D.C., and Arkansas. 1920, Ocoee, Florida, Ocoee Massacre. White mobs killed 30 to 80 Black residents on Election Day, burned homes and churches. Again, 1921, Tulsa, Oklahoma. Tulsa race massacre, Greenwood, Black Wall Street, was bombed, burned, and up to 300 Black people were killed. 1923, Rosewood, Florida, Rosewood Massacre. Entire Black town was destroyed, homes burned, and residents killed or displaced. 1943, Detroit, Michigan, Detroit race riot. White mobs killed 34 people, 25 Black, injured hundreds. U.S. troops were called in. 1964, Harlem and Rochester, New York, urban uprisings. Protests against police brutality turned violent. Black neighborhoods were heavily damaged. 1965, Watts, Los Angeles, California. Watts Rebellion, sparked by police brutality. Over 34 killed, 1,000+ injured, neighborhoods devastated. 1985, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, MOVE. Police dropped a bomb on the Black liberation group MOVE's home. 11 people, including children, died. 60+ homes destroyed. I love my country. I'm an American. Thank you.
If the ancient Egyptians were Arabs, why do the Arabs desecrate the tombs the way that they do? They never desecrate the tombs of Muhammad, Abu Bakr, or Umar, but they desecrate, and not only they allow Westerners to desecrate the tombs.